If you had the choice between sight fishing for big trout or nymphing down deep, which one would you choose? And what about streamers versus dries? Do you have an opinion there? And which of all these techniques do you need more help with right now? Today's guest is an expert in all of these disciplines, and today we're going to help you build a foundation to better understand when and where to sight fish effectively for big trout. This is the Wet Fly Swing podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back the fish species we all love. Hey, I'm Dave, host of the Wet Fly Swing podcast. I've been fly fishing since I was a kid. I grew up around a fly shop and have created one of the largest fly fishing podcasts in the country. And I've also interviewed more of the greatest fly anglers than just about anyone out there. Landon Mayer, South Platte guide, master show speaker, and our trout school professor will be walking us through the trip we're heading out to this year. You're going to find out how to prepare for a trip if you're focused on sight fishing for big trout, what reactions from fish really mean, how to decide when to fish deep or go shallow, and what you should do when you can't see the fish. We're going to talk about it all today. Plus, you're going to get Landon's best health tip on eating, and we're going to find out what he's saying no to this year. This is a good discussion. We got a big food tip for you on this one. Back to the dream stream. Here he is, Landon Mayer from LandonMayerFlyFishing.com. How you doing, Landon?
I'm great. Great to have a beautiful day outside and be in the podcast to start things off with you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, this is going to be, I'm excited for this one because we've got a big trip with you this next year. We're going to be fishing and learning some amazing stuff. So we're going to talk about that today. We're also in the midst of giving away a spot for one lucky person to come along on the trip. So we'll be talking that as we, as we go here today. But maybe give us an update. You were on the Littoral Zone, which is Phil Roy is kind of our Stillwater stuff in our network. I think it was a few months ago, or in March, I guess. Yeah. Talk about that. What have you been up to since that podcast with Phil?
Oh man, it's been an amazing year. We've actually had really good water. We ended up getting a good late snowpack. When Phil was here, we hit some of the rivers that were starting to come up in flow, but now that we're moving into the end of the year, it's just been packed with stillwater hatches, river hatches, guiding full time. I was happy to finally complete, in long time coming, but a wonderful project, a fly time video, which is going to be out, a mastery series with Headwater Books Media. So that's going to be out in November, and working hard on that publication. So it's been a great year, man. A lot of great fish, great opportunities, and excited for the winter months too, and some technical stealth fishing.
Right. And we were talking because we have an episode coming out Wednesday in a couple days with Scott Robertson talking about your big event that you do, the Clean the Dream. And we were I asked him about guiding. I wasn't sure if you're guiding throughout the full year. So do you guide all year long?
I pretty much do. I start in mid-March and go all the way through mid-November, even early December. And the summer months are meant for being on the water and travel, destination trips. And then the winter season, I do all the fly fishing shows, the whole circuit, and then some other independent travels to like Arkansas and some to Texas. So it's nice to be able to teach. And as you know, it's the next best thing to being on the water is to talk fishing.
Yeah, it is. Right, exactly.
For sure.
Well, this has been fun because we've done some podcasts with you over the years, and we're finally going to get out on the water with you. And I'm excited because we're going to talk sight fishing and hunting trout and all that. So today, that's what we're going to dig into, give some people, even if they can't make the trip, some tips on basically sight fishing and just what you do out there. So let's jump right into it and just talk about that. I mean, maybe first talk about the stream, the South Platte, why it's unique, what people, if they go and fish there, with you on this trip we have going, what they can take away to their other home waters.
Oh, absolutely. And quickly, just to start off, when you do talk to Scott about Clean the Dream, I'm excited because it's really the protection of the South Platte, its resource and Stillwater. So I'm pumped to hear that episode. And sight fishing for me is such a big part of the game that we play with anglers on the South Platte River system, because a lot of our fish are migratory, while we have a few fisheries like Deckers and Cheeseman where we have resident river fish. And we have fluctuating water all the time, whether it's high from runoff or it's low from late in the season into the winter months. But the one thing that's the value is that with all these tailwaters, you can fish them year round. So being able to find productive waters, the first part about sight fishing. Then we look for the fish, find out ways and angles to set up our approach and presentation. And then what a lot of people don't realize is you can sight fish with pretty much every discipline, from dries to nymphs to streamers. So it's not just a surface game, it's also subsurface, which makes it beyond exciting.
Yeah, that is great. So on this trip, and we'll set the stage for this in a little bit, what we have going with you, but we're going to have an opportunity. I believe we're going, maybe talk about that. I don't have the dates in front of me, but this is going to be kind of more of a later spring. I think more summer, early summer. Is that what we got going?
Well, we tried to do early summer, but I think we came to the agreement that we're going to end up doing the fall. So
Okay.
this will be a fall trip. And the reason for that is as we spoke this year, we've had so many seasonal changes with weather. Our summers tend to be starting later and creeping into the fall months. So we're going to do this in October. And for me, that's a wonderful time of year because we still can have opportunities for tricos if it's really warm. If it cools down quickly, we can go into some of the bigger leeches, some of the streamer bite. And we'll start off in a stretch of the South Platte River near Lake George. We'll go over techniques and strategies and kind of a cool or really neat looking, landscape and layout. But we'll start with a school session. And then after the first day of learning, then we'll go out to the public water side of things and really get after some of those really technical and selective fish. And it's nice because you get a chance to see different makes and flows of the river, but most importantly, try different disciplines as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Dries, nymph, streamer. So there's an opportunity in October in this that we can get into. We can try everything, and maybe people will take away after these, 3 days, on the water. They're going to be feeling pretty comfortable with all the disciplines, or at least the start. Is that how it's going to look?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's amazing. I'll have to say this year's a great example. The best trico fishing we had, surface water eats, hookups anywhere from 10 to 15 a day, were literally late September through the early part of October. So it just goes to show you how warm some of the seasons are. But it is all about learning and catching. And once you learn the techniques and you understand how to be effective on the water with them, the beauty of it is the South Platte River is so technical and there's so much diversity in its flow. You can take these disciplines and literally fish anywhere in the world, whether it be tight line nymphing, whether it's indicator nymphing, whether you're doing dries, whether you're doing streamers, dry dropper. We have a chance to cover all of it. And we really need to because our waters can be fast and wide. They can be narrow and tight, deep water, shallow water. So we're going to just cover all the zones and pack in as much information as possible.
Right. So that's awesome. We're going to cover it all, and maybe talk about, let's set the stage a little bit about the South Platte. Maybe describe the area. We could break this out by a few days that we're going to be there, but maybe talk a little about the high level on the river and then what we can expect.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll have this time of year, we can range from flows. I'd say the highest flows that we'll typically see in the South Platte River are 200 cubic feet per second and up, which equates to about the average depth of 3 to 4 feet, and some of the runs down to all the way to 8 feet. The flow is pretty unique. The sections we'll fish is more of an open prairie landscape, which you'd say would be classic Wild West terrain. And it really is. Where we're fishing in South Park is a ton of history up there. Some of the settlers that came in from the early 1800s still have some of their barns and structures that are standing in this dry climate. So you see this beautiful Rocky Mountain Range behind you, beautiful red barns, and a chance to really get after some of the fish. So that's kind of the setup of the river. And then the day can start from early in the morning, midday, afternoon, but we're really trying to concentrate on the low water and the dark water side. So I typically use early morning and late evening as an opportunity to target fish when you actually cast to them, make a presentation. And if it's bright and sunny, we take the midday session as a scouting mission, look for where the fish are holding. If they're selective, if they're spooky, we can come back and then concentrate on how to be effective with techniques. So it really is hunting, stalking, and looking for the visuals. And of course, understanding what the trout look like below the water surface and rising on top.
Gotcha. So if we come up to a piece of water, we're in there, let's just say it's on the first day. Talk about that, the trout hunting, the stalking, and how you would choose when to go with a, dry, wet streamer. Do you make that decision game time right when you're on the water?
I do. So I pre-rig for every trip, and I think it's important for anglers to do that because it allows your mind to connect to the river prior to actually being on the water. So you're coming up with a game plan, and preparation's, in my opinion, the most important way to be successful and to find more successful. The night before, if you're rigging, you're getting ready, analyzing in your head where you want to fish, what you want to fish. And then once you get to the water, if you need to make adjustments, I'm a huge fan of using micro swivels. So I pre-rig some of my leaders and tippets and flies and put them on little pieces of pool noodles, those little circular small noodles you'll find in the pool. And I wrap my flies and tippets on those, and then we can change up when we get to the water. But it is key to understand by looking at the weather the night before, understanding what you're in for the next day. If it's calm and sunny, you can do the hatch game. If the weather picks up, it gets cloudy, stormy, anything's moving in, you can do bigger bugs and streamers. And it really does start from that point. But then once you get to the water, rig up there, and then just start looking for productive zones.
Gotcha. Streamers is one thing that I've always struggled with. I think a lot of people want to get better at that. And you have some patterns that cover that. Maybe talk about that first off, some of your patterns, and then also maybe how you get into the streamer, how that looks on the water, how it might look when we're fishing with you.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the tug is the drug, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, once you have a fish damn near rip the rod out of your hand, you're hooked for life. So
Yep.
that's the starting point. But streamers are definitely fun. I think that's the excitement, and it's really something that captures your attention because, other anglers like Kelly Gallops and, those in the world that have been teaching the predatory sense of trout and how to be effective when you're pursuing them. It's so true. So if you think about it, this awesome fish is coming over to eat this small, like turkey leg size fly that you've tied. And you're thinking, how in the world did I get this fish to come over and react? And I'm a huge fan and believer of that and how aggressive trout can be. The one way that I've learned to fool fish, especially in tight, narrow quarters, is using my leech game. And my leech is with Umpqua Feather Merchants. The first design came out in 2007, and it's taken quite a bit of time for anglers to find these. But once they found confidence in the leech, what you realize is you can get a streamer reaction, a predatory reaction from a trout without forcing it out of its comfort zone or its hiding location in the river. So when we're out in this class, we're going to be able to get these pulsating, undulating, jigging leeches around rock structures, around wood, around vegetation, get the fish to react, maximize movement out of the leech with only having the fly move 3 feet instead of 15 feet to the bank. And it's surprising how many of these fish, even though it's a bite-sized snack, are going to act like they're eating, a slice of pizza. It's pretty cool.
Oh, wow. So good. And you already painted the picture of the environment we're going to be in with the mountains and things. As we're on the stream, like you said, there's going to be some variation depending on river flows and what we're fishing. But typically, Let's just take a situation again. You find a fish. Maybe walk us through that. So if you're thinking streamers are going to be, how do we get that fish to hook up? How are you sneaking up on these fish most of the time? How does that look?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's two opportunities. One where it is probably the most challenging. If you see the fish in the water and you're fishing a streamer, you want to make sure that you identify, number one, that the fish is actively feeding or it's comfortable. If it's hugging the bottom, snug down, it's wary, it's not moving, we most of the time understand that fish is probably not willing to eat, but it's always worth the effort and try. If the fish is suspended, actively feeding, then we can use streamers. And that approach is really, instead of being perpendicular or directly down from the fish, we're actually going to be upstream, and we would swing the leeches and streamers downstream to the water where we scouted first and we located where the fish is holding. So sight fishing isn't always keeping a clear view of the fish. A lot of times it could be finding the target, marking it on the bank where that fish is holding or a section of the water it's holding in the run, going upriver. And the first thing visible to the fish then is your fly, not you, your line leader and tippet, so you don't spook the fish. And that's probably one of the most exciting ways because you get the visual, you see the fish. And then the other way is to look for dark water deliveries. And that's where, as I mentioned prior, early morning, late afternoon, again, in the scouting mission side of things, you know where the fish is holding because we saw it in pure sun, bright daylight, midday. And then we come back to that location knowing that the fish, instead of having to hold in a deep run, the darker the sky, the less light, the more the fish is comfortable to come out to shallower water. Then we can pursue the fish with leeches, streamers, even dry droppers with leeches, where we get maximum movement, everything appears natural, and we get a lot of those fish to eat. And it's surprising how many fish we get using dry droppers in low light scenarios with the leeches, and the mini leech jig on the bottom is moving just like a streamer or leech would subsurface.
Amazing. So this is cool. So yeah, you don't necessarily have to always see them, and so you can spot them and mark them. I mean, are these fish for the most part without changes, without people coming in there, they're just holding tight? I mean, you find that all the time where you find a fish in the morning and then you're catching it later in the day. Is that the way it kind of works?
That time of year it is because it's more of a shoulder season scenario. Like if you come out in the middle of summer and you have complex hatches where there's multiple insects throughout the day, the fish are pretty apt to move around, stay exposed, and concentrate on the insects. But as you're dealing with migratory fish and you transition to the fall, where you transition to the spring, a lot of the fish are staged up for migration, so they're not always concentrated on food supplies. And that's where you need to get the reaction strike. You need to trigger them to come over and take the fly, or find it, because instead of a pod of, 10 or 15 fish actively feeding in a run, you may have one giant that's holding up deep in the run, in between or underneath weeds or around rock structures. And that's why it's more of an independent sits where you're hiking and looking for, hunting and stalking fish one-on-one.
Gotcha. And are these fish, I mean, just size? I've seen some of these photos of you. I'm not sure how many of them are on South Park in that area, but there's some pretty big fish out in this area. Maybe talk about that, the species and kind of maybe the life history and the size of these guys.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, what's really unique, the reason I guide in South Park is South Park, to paint this picture, is 200 miles in circumference, surrounded by Rocky Mountains that start at 12,000 all the way up to 14,000 feet. And it's one of the largest plateau basins in North America. And we're within this stretch of landscape, beautiful landscape that connects you to the west. In the old mining days, you have 27 miles of public fishing rivers and 3 still waters. So all of these locations supply opportunities for migration, tailwaters, rivers, and still waters. And it's amazing how big these fish can get. I mean, we've seen fish exceed 30 inches, mid-teens in the still waters. And then we've even had an 11-mile reservoir of fish in the reservoir in the river, brown trout especially, that can get upwards of 20. And of course, as 100% honest guide and outfitter, we can't promise that to anybody. That's the holy grail. But just to know that the idea of that fish is in the water, and the reason they call it the dream stream is sometimes you walk around a corner and you see a fish that's so big, you're like, man, am I dreaming? And that was John. It's pretty cool to think that, but that was Charlie Myers, who it's named after now, and John Barr. They both came up with the nickname, the Dream Stream, back in the early 90s. And it's cool to see it just evolve since then. So we have multiple size ranges, potential as high as some of the largest fish, to be honest, in the world. And what really sets the South Platte River system and the reservoirs apart is that all of our brown trout within this region are wild. So they quit stocking browns back in the early 80s when the reservoirs were in place in the dams. So you're dealing with naturally reproducing wild browns that not only are very strong and very large, but probably some of the smartest fish that you can encounter in any river system or reservoir.
Waters West Fly Fishing Outfitters is your go-to resource for swung fly techniques, two-handed casting, and anadromous fish. Find out why Waters West has built a cult-like following around their fly tying materials and why they are the go-to resource for the OP and beyond. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/waterswest right now to check in with Ed and Kyle and get all geared up to get on the water. This year, I ventured into the heart of eastern Idaho's Yellowstone Teton territory, where the fish were larger than life and the waters held the secrets of the best fly fishing out west. With crystal clear rivers like the Henry's Fork and the South Fork of the Snake, and enough lakes to keep you going all year long, make your way to Yellowstone Teton territory and embark on a journey to one of North America's finest fly fishing destinations. It's time to experience eastern Idaho for yourself and support this podcast at the same time. So back on the size game, so you get some browns and rainbows. Is there a mix of species in here?
So we do have a mix. We have rainbows and brown trout, which are our wild fish. We have Snake River cutthroats, and then we also have cut bows. And when these stock fish in these systems, what the biologists have learned over time is that instead of putting them in the river, they actually stock them in the reservoir. So the migration becomes natural after that, and the fish move up on their own. So yeah, those are the 4 main species. We also have the influence of kokanee salmon. We have pike, and then we have some of those larger carp. Sometimes they'll move into the runs as well.
Gotcha. So the reservoirs, and I guess we're kind of painting more of this picture. So they stock them in the reservoirs, and then they migrate up to, is that to feed or to spawn, or what does that look like?
That's a great question. Actually, for all the above, it's the first entrance to the river for a lot of these smaller fish, subcatchable, so fish that are anywhere from 4 to 8 inches. If they're stocked at that size, they'll actually find refuge in the river to get out of those big, vast open areas of deep water. So we have some of these juvenile fish moving up the river system, which is why some of the streamers can work really well. We have access to fish that concentrate on those food supplies. And then naturally over time, they'll progress and start to grow. But most of your river systems in South Platte River and South Park area, and also down from there, there's a lot of the entrance to the reservoirs from the river system, so the fish can migrate up into the dream stream. We can migrate up above Spinney Reservoir, up above Antero Reservoir. And the three reservoirs within South Park are 11 Mile Canyon Reservoir, Spinney Mountain Reservoir, and Antero Reservoir. So there's a ton of opportunities.
Amazing. And
Yeah,
that's
it's
part of the
cool.
growth. That's why you can get such big fish is that it's kind of like almost like the steelhead life history, right? It migrates to
Sure.
the ocean, it grows in the ocean, then
Exactly.
comes back. And same thing with these big fish.
Exactly. And I think one of the interesting parts about the fishery, which I'm truly thankful for, is the resource is beautiful, number one. And that's why we work hard with like Clean the Dream and other events to try to protect these awesome resources and in the fish that dwell in them. So multiple opportunities to allow ourselves to be ambassadors. But in addition to that, because there's so much water and because the seasons change so much and there's so much fluctuation, if I have clients that have been with me for 14 to 18 years, longstanding clients and really close friends now, every time they come out, it's never the same. So you're not fishing the same style, the same location. And that's what keeps people coming back is not the fact that you're only learning the techniques, but the application changes every single year. And that's what I think helps you evolve. And for myself as a guide, that's what I'm thankful for because some of the questions we received, the biggest one for me, does this ever get old? Are you still
Right.
passionate? Do you like to teach new anglers or experienced anglers? And the response is simply put, every single day that I guide, I have to guide as if it's somebody who's learning how to fly fish, or I have to guide as if I'm looking for the fish, not knowing where they could be. So you have to be in your A game every day. And I think that's what's helped me keep the passion over the last 27 years.
Yeah, that's cool. Nice. So I guess, yeah, and a little bit on the trip, we talked a little bit about this, but what we're going to be doing here, we mentioned it, we're doing a giveaway. So there is going to be one winner, but we're also going to have some paid spots for people that want to go out there. And we're going to be, basically, it's kind of like 4 nights, 3 days on the water. So we'll kind of meet up the first night and maybe walk through that. The first day, what
Sure.
will that look like in your mind? And let's walk through the trip a little bit.
Yeah, you bet. So it's awesome. The opportunity, of course, congratulations in advance to win this. I'd
Yeah.
totally be on board with that. That's an awesome scenario. And the first day we're going to meet up, the town of Lake George and the South Platte River that flows below that at Able Ranch allows us solitude. It's a wild trout fishery. It's not stocked. The fish migrate through, but by having access to that land, the group of us will go down there. We can go over techniques, strategies, talk about things. It's more of the one-on-one guiding with myself and with everybody in the group. And then we'll fish as well. And then once we get comfortable with the techniques, the following days is where we actually drive up into South Park. And just as if I was fishing on my own, we're going to analyze where the flows are up, where they're down, where it's been productive, where fish are moving. And we'll have a chance to hit different stretches of water and try different techniques and strategies because it really is the opportunity to see different flows, see different styles. So one of the days we'll do still waters, another day we'll do the river, and then by the end of the 4 days, the ultimate goal is to understand the techniques, understand how to be effective, and then really just one-on-one walking through the process of locating fish, find the right angle, make the presentation, fight the fish, and land the fish. And the other cool part, and you and I discussed this, let's say we go out and we do our trip and it's 6 to 8 hours that day, and then there's still time to fish. The beauty of it is we have stretches of water like 11 Mile Canyon where there's not access to outfitters, and that water is kind of leisurely water that you can fish on your own, which is one of the prettiest canyons, in my opinion, in North America. You can also fish on your own after the school or the class takes place. So there's opportunities throughout this entire area with Tarryall Reservoir, Tarryall Creek. There's so many options. And that's really what a lot of my clients do. We'll do a trip together. What they learn that day, they'll fish late into the evening, put their head down on the pillow, rinse and repeat, and get up and do the same thing. So it's a lot of fun that way.
Yeah, yeah, that's what we're going to be doing, and this is great because I think we do find that on a lot of our schools where people come for the school and then they either stick around after or they even get there early, right? So they're kind of
Sure.
just kind of utilizing, and then but we're also so Stillwater is going to be part of the game plan here too.
Yes, I believe so. It's going to be one day for sure. I can't say
Yeah,
which
good.
reservoir because conditions can change, but we'll be either at Antero or Spinney Reservoir going over the strategies and learning it because it is a part of it. If you and I showed up just to fish and we have the river that enters the reservoir and we have the reservoir itself, we want to be able to be effective on both and really adjust for needed for that day. And that's what gives you a chance to be the better angler.
That's sweet. And talk about that a little bit on the reservoir. What's that going to look like? How are we going to find fish, hook into fish on the reservoir?
Yeah, there's a couple options depending on what happens for the level. And it really is about the level. And later this season, supply and demand of water hasn't changed, and it's so true. It's water's for fighting, whiskey's for drinking. That's still the way it is in the
Yeah.
West. So the levels can drop, and we can have lower conditions. If that's the case, we would pursue it by foot, looking for a fish cruising on the edges, or go to buckets and drop lines. If there is opportunities for fish in the still water where we can get out, we also have access to belly boats, and we can get out and kick around in those with fins, try to see if some of the fish are holding in deeper zones. And it changes so much, but the technique is really understanding depth control, intercepting cruising fish if they're in the shallow waters, or understanding drop lines. And it's really intimidating to look at a still water and say, oh, this is, as I mentioned with Phil in the podcast, this is where we're going to start. What's surprising for a lot of people is the largest fish that I've encountered, from Argentina to the Great Lakes to Pyramid Lake, or even here in Colorado, is the largest fish I've seen landed have been literally 20 to 40 feet from shore. And oftentimes these fish can be found in shallow water depths of 5 to 8 feet or less. So it's incredible just how much access you get to these fish close to shore. And that's really the beauty of when we do that for the school as well.
Perfect. Well, we'll be talking a lot more about that as we go. I want to take it back to streamers real quick because I don't want to miss that. So we talked a little bit about the flies. Maybe talk about the setup a little bit as far as if somebody was going to get into this, kind of the fly line, the leader setup, and talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. I think the biggest challenge, in my opinion, when I started looking back, and I tend to analyze the way it was for myself when I was younger, when I was a kid, growing up, trying to throw a newspaper out, getting in high school, holding a job, and not just having a lot of money, but also having to be very, very specific about what I purchase. And the hardest thing, in my opinion, when I was younger, and I think it's found for anglers now, is when you're streamer fishing, what fly line do you use, right? Do you need a floating line, a full sink, a sink tip? Then you open up the catalog of these awesome companies and you're like, what? There's like 167 lines.
We just had that Josh Jenkins was on here, and I'll put a link in the episode. And
from SA.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. We talked about that, and I was like, man, there's a lot of lines. And we kind of joked about it, but he broke that down. So we'll put a link to that. But he also did say starting on, fly, leader, line, rod, reel, and that, or a lot of people start with the rod and then they get the line. Do you feel like finding the right line first is a good way to look at it?
Well, and that's a great response from Josh as well. And it's wonderful working with scientific anglers because, man, they're on top of it. And in design and development in Midland, Michigan, they really do understand it. And it is true. It can start from the fly working back to the rod. That's a great way to approach it. Personally, the way I view it is I think about depth control and I think about what line's going to match. And if I have shallow water, instead of using a full sink line, I'm going to use an intermediate sinking line with an unweighted fly. That way my fly is sinking a few feet or a few inches per second. The fly's unweighted, and I tend to not snag river bottom. And then for deeper runs, I used to believe, and I still do have scenarios where you need a sink tip if the water's moving super fast and swift. But a lot of the times I use a weighted streamer and then a fluorocarbon leader. And I want the streamer to get down to the bottom bucket first before the fly line or before the leader, before the tippet. And that's the reverse roll. That way you don't have belly sag from a leader or belly sag from a fly line where the line's in the deep portion of the run that the fish is holding first, and then your fly lags later. So a weighted fly, floating line for deep runs, intermediate sinking line, unweighted fly for shallow water. And that's a very simplistic way to start, but thinking of depth control and how to get the fly in view of the fish as fast as possible, I think is very important.
Perfect. And is there a line name? I know there's a bunch of them, but for a streamer line, or is there a one you'd throw out there that you use for SA?
Yeah, so for scientific anglers, it's MPX amplitude floating, and they're half line size heavy. That's an awesome weight forward floating line. And then for the sinking lines, the Sonar sink tips are great lines. The Sonar sinking leaders are really awesome. You can attach those to floating lines. And then their absolute fluorocarbon tippet and leader series is ideal for strength and the best in the market for breaking strength. I know when Fly Fisherman did that test a few years back, there was Scientific Anglers, Orvis, and Trout Hunter, I think, were at the top of the heap for strength control. So that's a big part of it. But yeah, it's really the floating line, managing the sinking line. And if you do need that sinking line, just understanding, temperature control too. Are you in cold environments?
Right.
Warmer environments, and just make sure the core of the line is developed and designed where it can still be supple enough to be effective.
Perfect. Let's keep it on the streamers here. Well, maybe just let's talk sight fishing. So give us a few tips. Like if somebody's coming up, they're they want to get into this. They're coming up to the water. What would you be telling them? A few tips to get ready to have success sight fishing? Because it seems like a challenge, right? Are you crawling on your hands and knees, the right combat?
Yeah. First challenge and first technique is to just breathe deep and don't shake, which is impossible many times. But it's funny because nerves kick in, and I think people who don't get into the sport of fly fishing as much, but they're new to it, they're starting to understand the passion we all hold for this is not only the passion for being out there effective on the water catching fish, but it's the lead into that. Like you see the giant, your heart's racing, it's pounding, you're shaking, you're like, oh, please God, don't spook this fish. That's the attraction, because you're trying to remain calm, and you're also trying to fool this fish with what's probably the hardest commission-based job on planet Earth. You're trying to imitate the natural food supply, and we're always at the whim of Mother Nature. But for streamers, when you see a fish, the most valuable information I learned from streamer fishing, I'd say in the last 10 years, is probably from Blaine Chocolate. When I was with Blaine in Tennessee in the South Holston, watching him cast is amazing. His presentation was really sweet. But the thing I took away from that is that the most effective portion of a retrieve is the pause. It's not the retrieve. So it's when you see fish following your fly, the challenge is not making the presentation. The challenge is allowing yourself to be patient, allowing the pause so the fish can attack the fly. A lot of times people, when they think of streamer fishing, they think of the strip set. The fish comes up, you're stripping fast, it comes over, it's going to attack your fly, and then you strip set, and the fish is gone. If in that moment you were able to twitch your fly, pause, let it drift back and almost drift into the face of the trout, not only does it fool the fish and piss it off, there's a chance it can turn, swipe at the fly, take it, and then you can set the hook. So what I teach is to be patient, understanding tips and tricks for the pause, and most importantly, your retrieve, to where it matches the behavior of the fish when it's feeding.
Gotcha. And how do you do that? How do you match? Is this more like your fly design, or how do you match? And does it vary on what your retrieve looks like?
Yeah, it definitely does. And the reason my leeches work well is because of that reason, which you just asked. So if you're trying to analyze the fish and see how you think it's going to react, is the fish super aggressive and willing to move 10 feet? Is the fish territorial, but it doesn't want to move out of the deep bucket and the rocks or the structure it's hanging around? When that's the case and you have a leech, you can swing the leech to add value and give distance on the presentation. If the fish is tucked in tight quarters, all you do is allow it to drift naturally below an indicator or dry fly, and then every bump, wave, or riffle, it's going to jig. Where if you need to, you can twitch the tip of the rod 3 inches side to side to get your fly to jig, and then you'll see how the fish reacts. So we're going to visually watch. Is the fish chasing the fly? Does it immediately attack the leech? And we know that we need to start using the close, tight quarters, almost like nymphing with the streamer technique, jigging deep in the runs where you don't have an indicator and you just have the mini leech jig on the bottom, and you're literally lifting and dropping deep in the runs. And that's the beauty of sight fishing with streamers, is you can see the behavior, but most importantly, you can see the reaction, and that's how you know the proper way to make a retrieve and presentation is based on the reaction.
The reaction. So if we're obviously talking about clear waters, you can see the fish in these situations, but what would it be? So you're swinging it down. What would be an example of a fish behavior where you would know you might change your thing, or maybe talk about some of the fish behavior you see?
Absolutely. Yeah. And for clear water, that's an important point that you bring up. It's when you see the fish in sight fishing and you can cast to them, that's such a thrill, and it's very nerve-wracking because you're trying to make sure you keep the fish active and don't spook it. Sight fishing is also finding productive water where you don't see the fish, and that's where understanding your retrieve comes into play. So if you're not seeing the fish and you're upstream and swinging down, mix up your retrieve. Try slow, try fast, try short, try long. But just know, most importantly, how your fly is reacting in the water. Does your fly move better when it's swinging and moving fast? Does it look better when it has a pause? Is it tied with dumbbell eyes or a tungsten bead on the head where it sinks fast and it dips down to maximize jigging? Or is it unweighted to where it just floats and moves like a natural leech or streamer would, and that's more of a swinging application? So the reaction of the movement of the fly and also the movement of your presentation can match the water and how the fish feed, and that's the beauty of sight fishing. Sometimes you see them, or sometimes you just see the productive water.
Imagine embarking on a journey to Alaska, that ultimate destination for adventure seekers. With FishHound Expeditions, this dream can become your reality. Picture yourself amidst the wild Alaskan landscape, where the northern lights dance across the sky and you're reeling in some of the biggest rainbow trout you've ever seen. It's an experience that feels like a dream, but with FishHound, it's an adventure waiting to happen. If Alaska is on your bucket list, FishHound Expeditions is the key to unlocking that dream. Visit fishhoundexpeditions.com today and mention that you discovered them through this podcast. That's FishHound Expeditions. Don't just dream about Alaska, experience it with FishHound. This is great. I think we're going to, kind of skim the surface a little bit on some of this and then go a little bit deeper. But the cool thing is we're going to take all this further on the water when we get into this. On the water, we'll be talking more. But let's move over a little bit to the dry dropper, because you mentioned that. How does that setup look? Are you fishing that equal amount as you are streamers throughout the year?
I think so. I think I've found myself in the last 5 years being attracted to that technique so much because it's one of the classics, right? Where you're fishing dry flies when you first get into the sport, and you see the fish rise, and that visual is literally the adrenaline rush we all chase. And after that, you learn that you can drop something below it and see if they're willing to take the dry or willing to take the dropper. But the one thing that's unique about dry droppers is that it is the ultimate natural rig. And when you're sight fishing for selected trout, anytime there's an indicator, it becomes unnatural. Anytime there's movement above the fish, if you're tight line fishing or tight line nymphing and the fish sees the rod moving above, it's unnatural. The beauty of the dry dropper is the indicator is the dry fly, and below that is the dropper, whether it's one or two flies, and it appears natural. Even if it's a larger fly the fish isn't seeing, at some point during the course of that year, it will see that larger dry, and I think it allows the fish to remain unpressured and happier as you feed them your imitations.
Gotcha. Yeah, because there are a lot of different indicators out there. Do you ever use just regular indicators, or do you see a lot of indicators still out there on the water?
Yeah, there's quite a few indicators. I mean, the siders are great when you're tight line nymphing and doing the Euro style. And you can also, add some putty to the mix. You can paint the leader. There's so many options now that allows you a chance to see it. What I'm a fan of doing with indicators when I'm dealing with depth control, if I am not tight lining where I can be in a deep bucket, because we have so many fluctuating water scenarios where the water depth fluctuates, the speed fluctuates, and it makes it challenging to stick with one discipline. We'll learn this in the class, but most of it I'm using double-fisted techniques where it has two rods rigged up, either two ways to nymph, one for streamers, or one for dries, one for streamers. Depending on what discipline is the most effective, that's how we rig for the day. But when I use indicators, I'm a fan of using the clear thingamabobbers. And the reason for that is it literally looks like a dirty water bubble on the surface. And if you match it to extra small all the way up to extra large, you have a chance for those fish to look up. They see a water bubble, and that becomes natural. You can also do the same with white, where they look up and they see foam. Foam is home, and they're used to seeing white, or they're used to seeing something transparent. So that plays a huge part as well.
Yeah. When would you switch between a dry dropper and a thingamabobber with a nymph below it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would switch if the water was high and really moving. Let's say the flow's kicked up, but we're out on the water, and a lot of stuff is stirred up from the bottom, or a lot of different food supplies from the river's edge are swept in. I'd use a clear indicator and then try to get the fish to come over and take. If I needed to make multiple adjustments to my rig, knowing I'm going to fluctuate in moving the indicator up or moving the indicator down a lot, I'll use a clear thingamabobber because I can move that quickly on a leader. If I'm sticking to fishing the edges, or I'm sticking to fishing a specific depth and I want to be locked in at that, and I want to go shorter, in some scenarios, I'll do the dry dropper. It really is depending on how selective the fish is as well. If the fish is super selective and the water is calm, it's almost like glass on the surface, I'll use a dry fly because it's the softest land. The next option to that is to use an extra small clear thingamabobber, but it's all about the land and then the option for buoyancy afterwards.
Gotcha. Perfect. So that is definitely going to be something in October when we're there that we'll probably be utilizing. Is that a technique we're going to talk about?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's really unique. I mean, the cool thing about it is you can be stealth. And a lot of times it's common for anglers when they first start, or let's say they fish big water, they're up in the Missouri River in Montana quite a bit, and they're fishing large indicators, deep rigs, and just crushing fish in runs that are 8 to 10 feet deep. That's great, and it really does work for that specific water. But what a lot of people find here is that you can be effective in stealth and very soft in your landings with indicators and dry flies and even without. So that's really the beauty of it, is because you're sight fishing, you're not relying just on the indicator. You want the best indicator to be the trout, and then you make the adjustment to get the best natural drift and understand depth control to follow.
Gotcha. And so we're talking a lot here, sight fishing, but what about,
Yeah.
the opposite when you got the water is maybe not, you can't see into the water. How are you
Sure.
changing your game plan a lot there if it's kind of turbid and all that?
Well, see, that's the beauty of it, right? And this is not the sales pitch, it's fact. And this is the reason that I'm the leech man. This is the reason leeches work. Leeches are found like midges all year: high water, low water, dirty water, clear water. So year after year, when I was guiding early in my career, I would struggle with what flies to use when the water's off color. What fly is going to give me confidence? And that's, it can be effective if you use eggs, but that's very specific to a season. It can be effective with worms, but that's usually when the banks are very moist and there's a lot of the seepage of, different worms and food supplies coming in from the edge. It's not always the case. Scuds are seasonal. And so I found all these different imitations were really effective, but only for a specific time. So if the water's high and dirty, the leeches become the attractor, but most importantly, they become your searching fly. So if the water is really deep and off color, if the sky's brighter, if it's cloudy, you can mix and match and do white and pink, where you got a pink bead and a white leech. You can do dark, where you have a rust or a red and you have a rust or red body. So you can mix and match the colors for the lighting conditions, but you're searching within the deep run. And we know that large trout love non-escaping food supplies, and that's what a leech is. They see the leech, it's like eating 100 insects at once. It's like a protein shake after the gym. And most of the time they don't shy away from it. So for high and dirty water, searching with leeches is unbelievable how productive that can be.
Gotcha. So that's why the leech is so good. And you use that leech, is that kind of throughout the whole year? Are you able to catch fish with the leech?
Absolutely, yeah. So if you buy that imitation from Umpqua, the flies that are supplied through shops from Umpqua, you're not just using the fly that I designed. You're literally using the same fly that I have on my rigs to date, 80% of the time or more. Like it's my go-to live by fly because it's one of those that fish are always apt to eat. It's versatile and imitates different food supplies. It can be unweighted, weighted. There's so many applications, and all of the series with Umpqua are designed for high water, low water, dirty, and clear water scenarios.
Gotcha. Wow, this is awesome. So we're going to come away with definitely some skills fishing the
Yeah.
mini leeches. This is good.
Yeah, it'll change your life. Like you literally, if you fish leeches effectively and you haven't done it before, when you leave, the first thing you do is you start thinking in your head, like we all do, right, about the fish that got away. You'll sit there and think about all the water you fished, and you're just like, man, I so wish I had a leech, right? Like,
Right.
if I could go back in my DeLorean, back to the future, just find the right section of water to be on with the leech at that time, I would.
Yeah, the leech. This is awesome. Good. So
Yeah.
we're going to definitely cover that. And then the dry fly action. So that's the other cool thing is October, like you said at the start, there's still going to be some flies on the surface.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I was out yesterday walking the still waters, and I'm not exaggerating. I'll have to send you some photos and we can post them just so people
Yeah.
can see. We have hoppers jumping all over the grass in the reservoir still.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, our hopper seasons, it's crazy. Today, the rest of this week, it's 75 degrees, and we're a week or two later than when we're doing the class next year.
Wow.
It's 85 degrees in Denver. We have dry flies and hoppers, and it's not uncommon. Some years are cooler, some years not as warm, but it tends to trend now towards the warming season extending into October. And yeah, we can throw big dry flies, we can throw small dries, and that's the beauty of it. When you're teaching in a class setting, the difference from the guided trip, and a lot of people ask that question, well, what is the difference with a class and a guided trip? And I think that's the most important thing we should touch on at the end here is when you do a guided trip, most of what you're doing is focused on the task at hand. It's a learning catching scenario. We want to catch the fish, and that's the ultimate goal. When we do a class, we have to open up the book and we have to be a little bit more creative in thought because you're trying to learn the technique first and then apply it to catch a fish. So if that's the case, we can go out there and if there's a hatch going on, why don't we unmatch the hatch and we throw larger dries and see how the fish react? If the fish are eating nymphs, why don't we throw a streamer and see how the fish react and evaluate this and make it a learning experience before we
Right.
catch? And that's the beauty of a school versus a guide trip.
Love that. Yeah, that's well put because that's kind of What we found too is that, yeah, I mean, fishing's fishing. It could be up and down, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And then the guide trip more, you're really focused. Like you might have a guy on for a day or half a day, and it's like, hey, we're going to get this person to fish.
Yes.
But the difference is, like you said, with the school is they're going to come away with these things people are going to be able to utilize for the rest of their lives, right? I mean, that's the focus.
It's amazing. Yeah. And that's what's changed in our sport. Our sport, when I was growing up, had a ton of information, but the information that we received from the legends was valuable and it really was effective. The difference now is that there's so many guides that are giving back on the water to clients that it's no longer the view of the angler. What I mean by that is when you fish, you see the water, the fish, the tip of your fly line, and the presentation. When you guide, you see the angler, the water, the line, the fish, everything's in full view. So you're learning more because the picture is vast and large. It's not narrow and tight. And in addition to that, you see everything from the cast, the presentation, the hookup, fighting the fish. So all of us who are giving back as guides now are able to give back more information than we did before because guiding has become such a large part of our industry and our sport.
Gotcha. Wow, this is awesome. Yeah. Well, I think, like we said, at the start, we're gonna be following up on all this as we go, and hopefully we can get you on another presentation here soon if we can find some time. I wanted to take us out of here with our Wet Fly Swing Pro shout out. We have a group here with some folks that are in it, and Sean Harper's one of them. We'll give a shout out to Sean today. And this is presented by Heated Core, one of our new partners, and they are a cold water. They have a product that keeps you warm on the water when it's cold. And I know that you're talking 85 degrees is a crazy late October.
Yeah.
But what do you do when you're fishing the wintertime and you're freezing? Give us a tip or two. Like, how do you stay warm? What are your clients using to stay warm out there?
Oh, yes. So, and this is, Sam's literally knows me for many years now, and they understand this. This is 100% truth. I roll out of bed. I get ready in the morning, and I literally put waders on in-house. I do not leave my house. I'm in waders when I walk out the door because the fireplace, the coffee, the core warmth I've developed that morning, it's now with me and it's in the waders. I do not wader up on the water. And then in addition to that, I have layers that it's all about sweat control. And this is key. I'm a huge fan of Primaloft with Sims.
Okay.
So the Primaloft aspect, if you sweat and that stuff gets wet, you're still staying warm. You still keep that core heat, and that makes a humongous difference. I mean, there's the days I look back guiding in Alaska, if I did not have, and at the time it was not as advanced as it is now, if I didn't have that Primaloft or that core warmth in some of those really rainy days or cold weather days, but you're walking and you're sweating like crazy, that's the biggest thing that I think anglers should really concentrate on is get your merino wool, get your base layer, your capelline, whatever you have. Build on top of that with fleece, but just know that even a Primaloft vest or something to keep that core warmth, even if it gets wet, is really one of the most important things. Yeah.
Is Primaloft, is that a synthetic or is that like a down?
No, it's a synthetic with Sims, and it's when it's placed with your proper layering below the Sims Gore-Tex waders, it allows you a chance to breathe. But again, the key is just making sure that you're trapping in the heat because we'll have days, and this is crazy to say, but it's true. We probably have some of the most unique fluctuations of temperatures you can ever encounter. For example, if we show up and it's super cold in the spring, our air temperature could be -12. By the end of the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it could be 60 degrees.
Oh, wow.
So you're talking almost 75 degrees fluctuation. And when you have to layer for that, you need to be super warm to start, and then you need to shed, but you can't shed them all. I think that's important. A lot of people, when they shed layers, they'll take off 2 or 3 tops, and you want to shed a couple layers on top, but then keep the Primaloft. Even if you're sweating, keep it. Make sure that you keep that core warmth because once you lose it, that's the hardest thing to get back.
Gotcha. Yeah. So Primaloft, that's a great tip there. Well, we're going to take it out of here briefly, but let's just, and I got a couple random ones, but before we do, just on the trip, again, we are, this is going to be going. So if people want to get involved in it right now, they can reach out to me and we're going to be setting this up. But anything else on the trip, the school that we have going with you want to highlight before we head out of here?
No, just appreciate the opportunity. I'm thankful. I'm excited to meet everybody. The passion I hold is a passion that I live by daily, and it has not disappeared, and I'm thankful for that. So whoever's with me, you'll feel it on the water. You're going to gain a ton of information. I think the key is also when you post all of this, Dave, and you're putting it out there, for people to pay attention for the specific dates that you select. Look for those dates in the fall, and whatever dates we decide on as far as what's going to be available to the angler, just know that it's the fall season, pretty comfortable. And I think just the expectations be learning catching. Learn first, catch afterwards, and know that you're going to advance yourself for opportunities on your home waters and abroad.
Perfect. This is great. And then as this episode's going out here, it's late October, but really November, December, January, the show season's right around the corner. So I was just talking to Ben recently, and we're going to be doing some stuff with him. And I'm excited because you still do the show circuit, right? So people can connect with you at the shows, and you're going to be doing everything like normal this coming year?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm super excited. The fly fishing show, I'm going to be on the whole circuit with Ben Frimsky and Chuck Frimsky and the whole crew and family. So I'll be anywhere from Denver to Boston, you name it. We'll be doing the 2 or 3 day shows and giving back. And I do casting demonstrations, tying demos, and keynote presentations in the rooms. And we also do some in-house classes there too, which are a lot of fun. So if this interests you or piques your interest, if you're at any one of those shows, look up the classes. I think it's $85 or $90. You get one-on-one for 4 hours in a classroom setting, and we develop it to where it's like a full-day guide trip. So this is being out on the water, and the next best thing to being on the water, some of the classes are there. So speaking of classes, that's an awesome opportunity at the fly fishing shows as well. And I think they'll post them up on the website and get the news out there just like you are for the on the water class.
Yeah, good. And we're going to be doing that. This is going to be great working with Ben here. And then and the final one here, and I can't leave it without a health, kind of a health question. I know the last one I asked you about. So I know you're doing some, weightlifting and staying fit and stuff. Yeah. I've been doing this thing this last week. It's there's a person out there that has a podcast. It's I think it's the Huber. It's Andrew. I can't remember the exact name, but he basically says this: say no 20 times a day. And this is like the things that you say, the bad stuff, right? You see a Snickers bar, say no in the moment. Not that you can't have that thing later, but it's delayed gratification, right? And there's some big health. So for you, what are those? Are you saying no to things throughout the day? Is that a tough thing? What are some things you're saying no to?
That's a great question. So I think my guilty pleasure is potato chips, right?
Oh, yeah.
And not potato chips like the ones I used to eat when I was 22 and I could not worry about it, right? But the protein potato chips. And yes, so I say no to those, and then I literally turn to something else that I can consume. And if I don't, I know Costco, I just recently purchased some potato chips that are made from egg whites. So just being able to make sure that what you're consuming is more protein. But usually what I end up doing is finding something, and this is a great little tip for fitness. Instead of doing potato chips, and my next biggest challenge are protein bars. Because if you look in the back of a protein bar, you're like, 20 grams of protein. But then you're like, wow, there's 34 carbs, there's saturated and trans fat, there's sugars, all these things come in. And if you compare that, it's funny you say Snickers.
Yep.
If you compare that to a Snickers bar, they're almost identical.
Oh,
so
really?
I started making my own protein balls. So I come home and using protein powder, almond butter, Greek yogurt. You can make your own pre-made protein balls that you can pack 40 for the week. So the next time that you feel like you want to grab that Snickers, just have a little Yeti Lunchable cooler with you and grab the protein balls, eat 2 or 3 of those, maximize 24 grams of protein, and then you're helping yourself understand that not only are you going to be better fit in the long run, but think about it, you're also saving how much money in pocket from not having to buy the candy bar, right?
I know. Wow, this is great. That's an amazing tip, Landon. So this is perfect. I'm going to be working on that one here, the protein balls. So
for sure.
Good, man. Well, this is great. I'm really excited about all this. Let everybody know where they can find you. Where's the best place if they want to track you down for anything you have going coming up here?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dave. So you can find me through my Instagram at Landon Mayer Fly Fishing, my Facebook page, Landon Mayer Fly Fishing, and also YouTube, my website, LandonMayerFlyFishing.com. I have some cool things coming up, including the new fly time video, which we filmed for 4 days. That's full length, an hour and 15 minutes. It's going to be out with Headwaters Media Group. It's the Masterclass Fly Time series. I think the first one they did was with George Daniel. So I'm excited to get all my flies with Umpqua down with that. I'm going to be doing a live episode, a Q&A with Ross Purnell and Josh Grantham from Scientific Anglers on November 11th. So that's going to be a live panel Q&A. And then after that, show season in January. I can't believe it's almost here. And yeah, I'm going to be here rinsing and repeating and chasing these fish down. So if you want to reach out any one of those platforms, check out the post, check out the classes, and most importantly, check out our class that we're doing for next year. And appreciate you and everybody else having me on board, my friend.
Awesome. Yeah, it's exciting. So, and I'll just give one shout out to our giveaway, wetflyswing.com/giveaway. People can enter right now and get a chance to win one of these spots with you and the school. So this is going to be good. Thanks, Landon. Appreciate it as always, all your time, and looking forward to staying in touch here.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome, man. I hope you have a great fall, great holiday seasons. Give your family my best, and the same to all the great anglers out there, my friend.
All right, your call to action today, you can go to wetflyswing.com/troutwest if you want to save a spot and reserve one of these spots. Find out what we have going right now. We just launched it, so check it out. And this is your best chance to just enter your name and email, and I'll follow up with you on the details. Also, we've got the giveaway. You can also enter that right now as well for one spot, wetflyswing.com/giveaway. Check it out right now. I'm going to head out here pretty quick because I got a big day ahead of me. But if you get a chance, please follow this show, and we'd really appreciate that. And I hope you have a great morning. I hope you have a great afternoon or great evening, wherever you are in the world. Looking forward to catching you on that next episode and talking to you soon. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.